So yesterday, ArenaNet dropped a Scourge nerf. They didn't touch anything else on Necro or any other classes, just one single change to Scourge. But it was a pretty significant change and is probably the biggest nerf to Scourge ever since they put the arming delay on Shades. What they did is they took the trait Sand Savant, which all of you probably know is the trait that increases the radius of Scourge Shades and also reduces the cooldown on the Shade Summon recharge. And they took that trait and changed it from reducing the cooldown of Shade Summon to increasing it by 100%, which basically doubles the cooldown. So if you're running Sand Savant, you will now find that you have a 30-second recharge time on each of your summon charges, which means Savant Scourge cannot just spam Shade Summon for the free Boon Corrupt from Unending Corruption and the free Torment and Cripple procs, which is a pretty heavy-handed nerf. Now, Savant Scourge is still quite good. It's still a good pick. You just have to micromanage when exactly you use your shades, and you can't just reposition them constantly, which definitely makes taking them on a lot easier because they can't just continuously reposition the shade on top of you. It's also important to note that since shades have a 10-second lifespan in PvP and World v World, with the new 30-second recharge on each of the 3 charges, that means if you want to maintain 100% uptime on your shades as a Savant Scourge, you need to only summon a shade once every 10 seconds on the dot. Because if you use any other timing, you will end up with downtime, which also means downtime on your minor traits, which give you useful things like damage reduction. So again, if you're playing Savant Scourge, it'll definitely be a lot more micromanagement than it was in the past, which is probably a good thing. Also gives a little bit more room to counter Scourge because they can't just continuously reposition. However, a lot of Scourges, in response to this nerf, have dropped Sand Savant entirely and are now taking Demonic Lure. What this means is they'll be way more bursty because Demonic Lore gives a large damage bonus to Torment, and it also gives extra burning. So a lot more damage, but it will also won't have the large shades, so it'll be small shades, and that also means less uptime on minor traits. So basically, they'll be a lot easier to engage as a melee due to the really small shades, and they'll be a little bit squishier due to the lower uptime on the minor traits. However, they will hit like a truck. So if you have not PvP'd since the patch, when you next PvP, be prepared for those really bursty Scourges. Now, overall, this is still a net nerf to the class. It's not a huge nerf. It's not a class killer. Scourge is not dead like some people have been making it out to be. Still very much the apex team fighting class in the meta right now. But it's certainly a step in the right direction. And it seems that ArenaNet is content to continue their path of chipping Scourge down a little bit at a time. Although I wish they would hurry up because I'm getting a little sick and tired of the fact we've been in pretty much the exact same Mesmer Scourge Firebrand meta for basically ever since Path of Fire launched. ArenaNet's been a bit slow when it comes to changing the meta post Path of Fire, and I honestly think that's somewhat of the player base's fault because we spent a lot of the Heart of Thorns era yelling at ArenaNet to do less drastic changes and stop, destroying classes with balance patches and stuff. So it seems ArenaNet's gotten a little bit timid about nerfing things. And honestly, at this point, I just want a meta change, please. I'm also very disappointed that ArenaNet went out of their way to nerf Scourge with this patch, and I do say it is out of their way because this is not a scheduled balance patch. They basically went outside of their normal release cadence for balance patches to nerf Scourge, but they didn't touch Mesmer despite the fact Mirage is basically the god class of the current meta. So I don't know why they decided to hotfix Scourge now, and they didn't fix Mirage, even though that's the bigger... whatever. ArenaNet's being slow as always. That's just what I'm going to chalk it up to. But to summarize, Savant Scourge is going to require a bit more micromanagement for people playing that. A lot of Scourges are going to be running Demonic Lore now, so we'll be prepared for a lot of very bursty Condi damage. And Mirage is still Apex God class. That's basically the summary here. To change topics a little bit, if you've been observant, you've probably noticed that in the video, every time I drop Shroud, I cleanse a bunch of Condis. That is because I've started experimenting with a new build where I'm using Unholy Martyr, which is a trait that I have never really used before. I've actually, in some of my discussions about the Blood Magic trait line, actually slammed the trait pretty hard in the past. But I've found that it is actually a very good trait when it comes to engaging Scourges and Condi Mirages in duels and small number of fights. Now in team fights you do have to be very careful because that trait also pulls 5 Condis to you when you enter Shroud. So if you can definitely shoot yourself in the foot with it if you're not careful, but I found with some careful positioning it can definitely be a very useful trait. And honestly, if you do pull so many Condis to you that it destroys your Shroud, well, you probably saved one of your allies' life with that trait. So it's actually a lot better of a trait than I used to give it credit for. And I've definitely been finding it very useful now that there's all these demonic lore Scourges running around, because the conventional Power Reaper build struggles a lot more with the burstier or Condi classes because it primarily relies on tanking Condis on Shroud with Shroud. And obviously against a demonic lore Scourge you just can't get away with that. So running Unholy Martyr allows me to circumvent that by giving me basically 21% life force every time I come out of Shroud in a 1v1 against a Condi class. Although it's the build is not as effective against power classes, so that is something I've had to be aware of. But I found it very effective, and if you are a Reaper fan like me who is struggling in this demonic lore Scourge meta and Condi Mirage meta, I definitely recommend picking up Unholy Martyr, because it can definitely make those matchups a lot easier. And I'm going to stop talking and return to the gameplay. I'll be able to save him.
Your soul is mine. You are all weak. Chill to the bone. You've lost the dark. Suffer. Your soul is mine. Your soul is mine.
Be ready to give the signal and return fire once the cannons are loaded.
So the warrior got exasperated and left, which is good for me because I can kill this Scourge in a 1v1 because of the build I'm running.
They've taken the bazaar from you.
Your soul is mine.
The dock's been captured. Cannons loaded. Ring the bell to signal them to fire. Blue team, ring the bell. Fire all cannons. Your team is victorious.